Truckers, Part 28. Night came. Masklin thought the humans were never going to leave. One of them, with a torch and a box of tools, spent a long time examining fuse boxes and peering at the wiring in the basement. Now, at last, even it was gone, grumbling and slamming the door behind it. After a little while, the lights came on in the garage. There was a rustling in the walls, and then a dark tide flowed out from under benches. Some of the young gnomes in the lead carried hooks on the end of thread lines, which they swung up to the lorry's covers. They caught one after another, and the gnomes swarmed up them. Other gnomes brought thicker string, which was tied to the ends of the thread and gradually dragged upwards. Masklin ran along, under the endless shadow of the lorry, to the oily darkness under the engine where Dorcas's teams were already dragging equipment into position. Dorcas himself was in the cab, rooting around among the thick wires. There was a sizzling noise, and then the light in the cab came on. "There," said Dorcas. "Now we can see where we're at. Come on, lads, let's have a bit of effort." When he turned around and saw Masklin, he made as if to hide his hands behind his back, and then thought better of it. Both of them were thrust into what Masklin could now see were the fingers cut out of rubber gloves. "Ah," said Dorcas, "didn't know you were there. Bit of a trade secret, see? Electricity can't abide rubber. It stops the stuff from biting you." He ducked as a team of gnomes swung a long wooden beam across the cab and started to fasten it into the gear lever. "How long's it going to take?" shouted Masklin as another team ran past, dragging a ball of string. There was quite a din in the cab now, and threads and bits of wood were moving in every direction in what she hoped was an organised way. "Could be an hour, maybe," said Dorcas, and added, not unkindly, "We'd get on quicker, without people in the way." Masklin nodded and explored the rear of the cab. The lorry was old, and he found another hole for a bundle of wires which, at a squeeze, would take a gnome as well. He crawled out into the open air and then found another gap which led him to the rear of the lorry. The first gnomes aboard had dragged up one end of a thin piece of wood which was acting as a gangplank. The rest was scrambling up it now. Masklin had put Granny Morky in charge of this. The old woman had a natural talent for making frightened people do things. "Steep!" she was shouting at a fat gnome who had got halfway up and was clinging there in fright. "Call this steep? It ain't steep. It's a stroll. Want me to come down there and help you?" The mere threat budged him from his perch, and he nearly ran the rest of the way, ducking gratefully into the shadows of the cargo. "Everyone had better try to find somewhere soft to lie down," said Masklin. "It could be a rough journey, and you must send all the strongest gnomes up towards the cab. We're going to need everyone we can get, believe me." She nodded, and then shouted at a family that was blocking the gangway. Masklin looked down at the endless stream of people climbing into the lorry, many of them staggering under the weight of possessions. Funny, but now he felt he'd done everything he could. Everything was ticking over like something that went tick. Either all the plans would work, or they wouldn't. Either the gnomes could act together, or they couldn't. He recalled the picture of Gulliver. It probably wasn't real, Gerda had said. Books often had things in them that weren't really real. But it would be nice to think that gnomes could agree on something long enough to be like the little people in that book. "Well, it's all going well then," he said vaguely. "Well enough," Granny nodded. "It would be a good idea if we found out exactly what was in these boxes and things," Masklin ventured, "because we might have to get out quickly when we stop and—" "I told Torrit to see to it," said Granny. "Don't you worry about it." "Oh," said Masklin weakly. "Good." He hadn't left himself anything to do. He went back into the cab out of sheer, not boredom, because his heart was pounding like a drum, but out of restlessness. Dorcas's gnomes had already built a wooden platform above the steering wheel and right in front of the big window. Dorcas himself was back down on the floor of the cab, drilling the driving teams. "Right," he shouted. "Give me first gear." "Pedal down, 2, 3, chorused the team on the clutch pedal. "Pedal up, 2, 3, shouted the accelerator team. Lever up, 2, 3, echoed the gnomes by the gear lever. Pedal up, 2, 3, 4. The leader of the clutch team now threw Dorcas a salute. Gear all changed, sir, he shouted. That was terrible. Really terrible, said Dorcas. What happened to the accelerator team, eh? Get that pedal down. Sorry, Dorcas. Masklin tapped Dorcas on the shoulder. Keep doing it, Dorcas commanded. I want you all dead smooth all the way up to 4th. Yes? What? Oh, it's you. Yes, it's me. Everyone's nearly on, said Masklin. When will you be ready? This lot won't be ready ever. Oh. So we might as well start whenever you like, and we pick it up as we go along. We can't even try steering until it's moving, of course. We're going to send a lot more people to help you, said Masklin. Oh, good, said Dorcas. Just what I need. Lots more people who don't know their right from their left. How are you going to know which way to steer? Semaphore, said Dorcas firmly. Semaphore? Signalling with flags. You just tell my lad up on the platform what you want done, and I'll watch the signals. If we'd had one more week, I reckon I could have rigged up some sort of telephone. Flags, said Masklin. Will that work? It'd better, hadn't it? We can give it a try later on. And now it was later on. The last gnome scouts had climbed aboard. In the back of the lorry, most of the people made themselves as comfortable as possible and lay, wide awake, in the darkness. Masklin was up on the platform with Angelo, Gerda and the Thing. Gerda knew even less about lorries than Masklin, but it felt best to have him there, just in case. After all, they were stealing Arnold Brothers' established 1905's lorry. Someone might have to do some explaining. But he'd drawn the line about having Bobo in the cab. The rat was back with everyone else. Grimmer was there too. Gerda asked her what she was doing there. She asked him what he was doing there. They both looked at Masklin. She can help me with the reading, he said, secretly relieved. He wasn't, despite lots of effort, all that good at it. There seemed to be a knack he couldn't get the hang of. Grimmer, on the other hand, seemed to know how to do it without thinking. If her brain was exploding, it was doing it in unnoticeable ways. She nodded smugly and propped the highway code open in front of him. There's things you've got to do, he said uncertainly. Before you start, you've got to look in a mirror, said Grimmer. Mirror, that's what it says here, mirror, said Masklin firmly. He looked inquiringly at Angelo, who shrugged. I don't know anything about that, he said. My driver used to look at it, but I don't know why. Do you have to look for anything special? I mean, perhaps you have to make a face in it or something, said Masklin. Whatever it is, we'd better do things properly, said Gerda firmly. He pointed. There's a mirror up there, near the ceiling. Daft place to put it, said Masklin. He managed to hook it with a grapnel and, after some effort, pulled himself up to it. Can you see anything? Gerda called out. Just me, said Masklin. Well, come on back down. You've done it. That's the main thing. Masklin slid back down to the decking, which wobbled under him. Grimmer peered at the highway code. Then you've got to signal your intentions, she said. That's clear anyway. Signaller? One of Dorcas's assistants stepped forward, a bit uncertainly, holding his 2 white flags carefully downwards. Yes, sir, ma'am, he said. Tell Dorcas... Grimmer looked at the others. Tell him we're ready to start. Excuse me, said Gerda. If it's anyone's job to tell them when we're ready to start, it's my job to tell them when we're ready to start. I want to be quite clear that I'm the person who tells people to start. He looked sheepishly at Grimmer. We're ready to start, he said. Right you are, ma'am. The signaller waved his arms briefly. From far below, the engineer's voice boomed back. Ready! Well then, said Masklin. This is it then? Yes, said Gerda, glaring at Grimmer. Is there anything we've forgotten? Lots of things, probably, said Masklin. Too late now, at any rate, said Gerda. Yes. Yes. Right then. Right. They stood in silence for a moment. Shall you give the order, or shall I? Said Masklin. I was wondering whether to ask Arnold Brother established 1905 to watch over us and keep us safe, said Gerda. After all, we may be leaving the store, but this is still his lorry. He grinned wretchedly and sighed. I wish he'd give us some sort of sign, he said, to show he approved. Ready when you are up there, shouted Dorcas. Masklin went to the edge of the platform and leaned on the flimsy rail. The whole of the floor of the cab was covered in gnomes, holding ropes in readiness or waiting by their levers and pulleys. They stood in absolute silence in the shadows, but every face was turned upwards, so that Masklin looked down at a sea of frightened and excited blobs. He waved his hand. "Start the engine," he said, and his voice sounded unnaturally loud in the expectant silence.